The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like dying insects, casting a sickly yellow glow over the worn linoleum floor of Marco's trattoria. I could feel the ache settling deep into my bones, that particular exhaustion that comes from standing for 12 hours straight, smiling through the pain, pretending that carrying heavy trays and enduring wandering hands was somehow dignified work. The dinner rush had finally subsided, leaving only the lingering smell of garlic, tomato sauce, and the faint trace of expensive cologne from the earlier crowds. My feet screamed with every step as I wiped down table 7 for what felt like the 100th time that night. The red checkered tablecloth was stained with marinara sauce that wouldn't come out no matter how hard I scrubbed. Story of my life, really. Stains that wouldn't wash clean. Mistakes that followed me like shadows. "Emma! Table 12 needs water." Marco's voice cut through my fog of exhaustion, sharp and demanding as always. I grabbed the pitcher with trembling hands, my muscles protesting. In the grimy mirror behind the bar, I caught a glimpse of myself. Dark circles under my eyes, blonde hair escaping from its bun in sweaty tendrils, the cheap black uniform hanging off my frame like I was a child playing dress-up in adult clothes. I looked invisible. Forgettable. Just another struggling waitress in a city that chewed up girls like me and spit them out without a second thought. The restaurant was nearly empty now, just a few stragglers nursing their espressos and amarettos. I had stopped noticing customers individually hours ago. They all blurred together into a mass of demanding voices and inadequate tips. But as I approached table 12 with the water pitcher, something made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. He sat in the corner booth, the one we usually reserved for couples celebrating anniversaries, but he was alone. Not alone in the sad, lonely way. Alone in the way that predators are alone, commanding space that smaller creatures instinctively vacate. The dim overhead light created shadows across his face, sharp cheekbones and a jaw that could have been carved from marble. His suit was black, not the kind of black you buy at a department store, but the kind that whispers wealth in a language only certain people understand. Even sitting, I could tell he was tall, broad-shouldered, and absolutely still in a way that made my pulse quicken. 2 men flanked the entrance near his table. I hadn't noticed them before. How had I not noticed them? They wore suits too, cheaper than his but still expensive, with the telltale bulge under their jackets that my stepfather had taught me to recognize. Protection. Security. The kind that doesn't ask questions, just acts. I had learned long ago to make myself small around dangerous men, to keep my eyes down, my voice soft, my presence minimal. Survival tactics from a childhood I tried hard to forget. "Water, signore?" I kept my gaze fixed on the pitcher, watching the ice cubes shift and crack. Silence stretched between us like a taut wire. I could feel his eyes on me, not the hungry, invasive stares I usually got from drunk businessmen, but something else. Something assessing, calculating. The kind of attention that meant you'd been noticed, and being noticed was rarely good for girls like me. "Leave it." His voice was low, textured like smoke and aged whiskey. American accent, but something else underneath. Italian roots, maybe. The kind of voice that didn't need to rise to command obedience. My hand shook slightly as I set the pitcher down. A few drops splashed onto the tablecloth. I watched them spread, darkening the fabric, and felt my cheeks burn with embarrassment. Stupid. So stupid. I reached for my towel to dab at the spill, but his hand moved. Just slightly, a minimal gesture. And I froze. "Sit." It wasn't a request. I glanced toward the bar where Marco was counting the register, then at the 2 security guards who hadn't moved, their eyes tracking my every movement. My legs felt like water, but I slid into the booth across from him anyway, because what choice did I have? You don't say no to men who travel with armed guards. Up close, he was devastating. Not handsome in the conventional way. His nose had been broken at least once, and there was a thin scar cutting through his left eyebrow. But there was something magnetic about him. Power radiated from him like heat from pavement in summer. His eyes were dark, nearly black in the dim light, and they studied me with an intensity that made me want to simultaneously run and stay perfectly still. "You speak Italian." Not a question. A statement. My throat went dry. A little. My grandmother. What's your name? Emma. My voice came out smaller than I intended. Emma Russo. Something flickered across his face. There and gone so quickly I might have imagined it. His fingers drummed once on the table. Long fingers, I noticed, with a heavy gold ring on his right hand. Some kind of family crest, the details obscured in shadow. Russo, he repeated, tasting the syllables like wine. Your people from the old country? I nodded, unsure where this was going, my heart hammering against my ribs. My great-grandparents came from Calabria, but I was born here. I don't know much about... You're tired. He cut me off, his gaze moving over my face with unnerving precision. You work too hard for too little. This place doesn't deserve you. The observation was so unexpected, so intimate, that I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes. I blinked them back furiously. I didn't cry. Not anymore. Not where people could see. I need the job, I said, lifting my chin with what little dignity I could muster. It pays the bills. Barely. Again, that assessing look, like he could see through my cheap uniform straight to the overdue rent notices stuffed in my bag, the empty refrigerator in my studio apartment, the pride I swallowed every single day just to survive. A phone buzzed. One of the guards stepped forward, murmuring something in rapid Italian. I caught only fragments. Chiamata importante. Important call. Dobbiamo andare. We need to go. The man across from me didn't acknowledge the interruption, his eyes still locked on mine. The air between us felt charged, dangerous, like standing too close to a cliff edge, feeling the pull of the drop. Do you know who I am? He asked quietly. I shook my head, my mouth too dry to form words. His lips curved slightly, not quite a smile. Good. Keep it that way. He stood in one fluid movement, and I realized I'd been right. He was tall, easily over 6 feet, with the build of someone who could break bones without breaking a sweat. He reached into his jacket, and I flinched instinctively. He paused, something like disappointment crossing his features. When his hand emerged, it held a wallet, not a weapon. He pulled out several bills, hundreds, I realized with shock, and placed them on the table. For the water, he said, and there was dark amusement in his voice. That's too much. I started to protest, but he was already walking away, his guards falling into formation around him like a well-rehearsed dance. The restaurant door chimed as they left, and suddenly I could breathe again, the oxygen rushing back into the room. I looked down at the money. $500, for a glass of water I'd spilled. My hands trembled as I reached for the bills. That's when I saw it, tucked underneath. A business card. Heavy cardstock, embossed with a phone number and a single name. Dante. No last name, no title, just Dante, and a crest that matched the ring I'd seen on his finger. A lion devouring a serpent. I should have thrown it away. Should have counted my blessings for the generous tip and forgotten the entire strange encounter. But as I stared at that card, feeling the weight of his gaze still burning into my skin even though he was gone, something told me this wasn't over. I'd been noticed, and in this city, being noticed by the wrong people could be the most dangerous thing that ever happened to you. Emma! Marco's voice made me jump. Clean up table 12 and get out of here. We're closing. I slipped the card into my apron pocket, my fingers brushing against the worn fabric. As I cleared the table, I noticed something else, a faint smell lingering in the booth. Cedar and bergamot, expensive and masculine, the kind of scent that would cling to clothes, to memory, refusing to wash away. Outside, the November wind cut through my thin jacket as I waited for the bus. The streets were slick with rain, reflecting the neon signs and streetlights in wavering pools of color. At this hour, the city felt different. Sharper edges, darker corners, the kind of place where bad decisions were made and regrets were born. I pulled out the business card again, studying it under the harsh light of the bus stop. The lion and serpent seemed to writhe in the shadows, alive and hungry. What kind of man carried cards like this? What kind of business required armed guards and single-name introductions? The kind you don't ask questions about, a voice whispered in my head, the kind that gets girls like you killed. But $500. That was rent. That was groceries for a month. That was breathing room I hadn't had in 2 years, since my mother died and left me with nothing but debt and a name I'd spent my whole life trying to live down. My phone buzzed with a text from my roommate Sarah. Landlord came by again. Says we have 48 hours or we're out. I stared at those words, feeling the familiar panic rise in my chest like bile. 48 hours. I had one paycheck coming, maybe $200 after taxes. Not enough. Never enough. The bus pulled up, its brakes squealing in protest. I climbed aboard, scanning my Metro card with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. As I collapsed into a seat by the window, I pulled out the card one more time. Just a phone number. Just a name. But the weight of it in my palm felt like a promise, and a threat rolled into one. I should throw it away. Instead, I tucked it into my wallet, between my expired credit card and my mother's funeral program, just in case. Just until I figured out what to do about the rent, about the bills, about the life that kept trying to bury me no matter how hard I fought to stay above ground. The bus lurched forward, and I pressed my forehead against the cold window, watching the city blur past. Somewhere out there, in a world I'd never touch, Dante was probably already forgetting about the exhausted waitress with the Italian last name. I was nobody to him. Nothing. But as I closed my eyes, I could still feel the weight of his gaze. Still smell cedar and bergamot. Still hear the command in his voice when he told me to sit. And some deep, primal part of me, the part that remembered how to survive, how to recognize predators, knew with absolute certainty that this wasn't over. Whatever had started tonight in that dimly lit corner booth, it had only just begun, and I had no idea how to stop it. The next morning arrived too soon, dragging me from restless dreams filled with dark eyes and the scent of cedar. My alarm screamed at 6 a.m., and I slapped it silent with more force than necessary. The studio apartment was freezing. The radiator had been broken for weeks, and our landlord had stopped returning calls, so I wrapped myself in the threadbare blanket and stared at the water-stained ceiling, trying to remember why getting out of bed was worth the effort. 48 hours. The eviction notice might as well have been tattooed on my eyelids. Sarah was already gone when I finally dragged myself to the bathroom we shared. She worked the early shift at a coffee shop downtown, slinging lattes for business executives who probably spent more on their morning caffeine than we made in a week. Her toothbrush sat in the cup next to mine, and I felt a pang of guilt. She'd taken me in when I had nowhere else to go, after my mother's creditors had taken everything. I couldn't let her get evicted because of me. The shower ran cold, of course it did, and I scrubbed myself with cheap soap under the icy spray, trying to wash away the memory of last night. But Dante's face kept surfacing in my mind, like something drowned that refused to stay down. The way he'd looked at me, like he could see past the exhaustion and desperation to something underneath. Something I didn't even know existed. Do you know who I am? I should have asked Marco after he left. Should have done what any sensible person would do and found out exactly what kind of danger I'd stumbled into. But I hadn't, because some cowardly part of me didn't want to know. Didn't want confirmation of what my instincts already screamed. I got dressed in jeans and my last clean sweater. Dark blue, slightly too big, with a hole in the left sleeve I'd tried to mend with black thread that didn't quite match. The business card sat on my dresser where I'd left it, stark white against the scarred wood. I'd taken it out of my wallet last night, telling myself I was going to throw it away. Instead, I picked it up and slipped it into my back pocket. The November air bit through my jacket as I walked to the bus stop, my breath forming white clouds that dissipated into the gray morning. The city looked different in daylight, less threatening, more tired. Just like me. Just like everyone hustling to minimum wage jobs that would never be enough. Chasing dreams that had died somewhere between childhood and the crushing weight of reality. I wasn't scheduled to work at Marco's until evening, which meant I had the day to figure out a miracle. I'd already called every temp agency, picked up every extra shift I could. My bank account had $17.63. The universe had a sick sense of humor. The library was warm at least, and free. I claimed a computer in the back corner and pulled up job listings, scrolling through the same positions I'd applied to dozens of times before. Administrative assistant, bachelor's degree required. Retail manager, 5 years experience preferred. Data entry, filled. Everything was filled or out of reach, designed for people who'd had opportunities I'd never been offered. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Before I could stop myself, I typed, Dante Italian Mafia boss. The screen flooded with results. My heart hammered as I clicked through them, finding nothing concrete, just rumors and speculation. The city had its share of organized crime, everyone knew that, but the real players kept their names out of the papers. I tried different searches, each one leading to dead ends or conspiracy theory forums that made my skin crawl. I was about to give up when I found a photograph buried in a 2-year-old Society page article. A charity gala, the kind where the wealthy paraded their generosity while wearing dresses that cost more than my yearly salary. In the background, slightly out of focus but unmistakable, stood Dante. The caption identified him only as Dante Salvatore, philanthropist and businessman. Businessman. Right. Because businessmen needed armed guards and traveled with an aura of barely contained violence. I clicked on his name, but there was nothing else. No social media profiles, no interviews, no paper trail except that single photograph where he looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. A ghost who existed in the margins of society, powerful enough to erase himself from public record. Salvatore. The name rolled through my mind like thunder. I'd heard it before, whispered in certain circles, spoken with a mixture of respect and terror. The kind of name you didn't say too loudly if you valued your safety. Emma? I jumped, slamming the laptop closed with enough force to make the librarian glare at me from her desk. My heart was in my throat as I turned to find Marcus standing behind me, his weathered face creased with concern. Marcus had been my mother's friend, one of the few people from her life who'd bothered to check on me after she died. He ran a small grocery store in Little Italy, the kind of place where old men played cards in the back and everyone knew everyone else's business. Marcus. Hi. I didn't hear you come up. You looked like you were a million miles away. He settled into the chair next to me, moving with the careful precision of someone whose joints didn't work like they used to. How you doing, kid? Haven't seen you around the neighborhood lately. Working a lot, I said, which was true enough. Trying to make ends meet. His eyes, shrewd despite his age, studied me carefully. Your mama would be proud of you, you know, working hard, staying out of trouble. He paused, and something in his expression shifted. You are staying out of trouble, aren't you? The question hung in the air between us, weighted with meaning I didn't want to examine. What kind of trouble would I get into? Marcus pulled out a newspaper from his coat, folded to a specific page. My stomach dropped even before he turned it toward me. It was the Society section, a recap of last night's events around the city. And there, in a small column on the side, was a paragraph that made my blood run cold. Dante Salvatore was spotted dining alone at Marco's Trattoria in the financial district last night. Sources say the notoriously private businessman rarely ventures out to such public establishments, leading to speculation about potential business dealings in the area. Representatives for Salvatore declined to comment. Marcos, Marcus said quietly. That's where you work, isn't it? I couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. They'd written about it. About him being there, which meant other people knew. Other people were watching. Emma. Marcus's voice was gentle but firm, the way he used to talk to my mother when she was making bad decisions. Men like Dante Salvatore, they're not for girls like you. They're not for anyone who wants to live a long, quiet life. You understand what I'm saying? I served him water, I whispered. That's all. He left a big tip and walked out. I'm not good. He patted my hand, his palm warm and papery. Keep it that way. The Salvatore family, they've run this city's underworld for 3 generations. Dante, he's the worst of them. Smart, ruthless, and he doesn't forgive. Stories I could tell you. He trailed off, shaking his head. Just stay away, Emma. Promise me. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Marcus squeezed my hand once more, then stood, moving toward the exit with the slow gait of someone carrying heavy memories. I watched him go, my mind reeling. 3 generations, the worst of them. Doesn't forgive. I should have been terrified, should have taken the business card from my pocket right then and thrown it in the trash. Maybe burned it for good measure, but all I could think about was the way Dante had looked at me, like I was something rare and worth protecting. The way he'd noticed I was tired, overworked, barely surviving. Details men like him shouldn't care about, shouldn't even register. This place doesn't deserve you. No one had said anything like that to me in longer than I could remember. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Come to this address tonight at 8 p.m. Come alone. D below it. An address in the Upper East Side. The kind of neighborhood where doormen wore white gloves and penthouses had private elevators. My hands trembled so badly, I nearly dropped the phone. How did he get my number? Had he asked Marco? Looked me up somehow? The implications made my head spin. I should delete it. Block the number. Maybe even go to the police. Though what would I tell them? A dangerous man gave me a large tip and invited me to his apartment. Instead, I found myself typing, "How did you get this number?" The response came immediately. "I get everything I want, Emma. See you tonight." The presumption of it, the absolute certainty that I would obey, should have made me angry. Should have triggered every self-preservation instinct I possessed. But underneath the fear, something else stirred. Curiosity. Recklessness. The desperate, drowning part of me that saw this as the universe offering a lifeline, even if that lifeline was wrapped around a bomb. I spent the rest of the day in a fog, going through the motions of living while my mind spun with possibilities. I could go. I could not go. I could tell Sarah, could call Marcus back, could do any number of sensible things that would keep me safe and small and struggling for the rest of my life. By 7 p.m., I was standing in front of my closet, staring at clothes that all screamed poverty in slightly different tones. I settled on black jeans without holes and a dark green blouse Sarah had given me for Christmas last year. The nicest thing I owned, though the fabric was already pilling at the seams. "Where are you going?" Sarah appeared in my doorway, her blonde hair still damp from her own shower. She worked doubles most days, and the exhaustion showed in the hollow spaces under her eyes, meeting someone about a job opportunity. The lie tasted bitter on my tongue, but I couldn't tell her the truth. Couldn't drag her into whatever this was. "This late?" Suspicion colored her voice. "Emma, I'll be fine. I'll text you when I'm on my way home." I grabbed my coat before she could ask more questions. Practically running out of the apartment, the subway ride to the Upper East Side felt like traveling to another world. The passengers changed gradually. Fewer tired workers, more elegant women with shopping bags from stores I'd only window shopped at, men in suits that probably cost more than my car used to. I felt like an imposter, out of place in their polished world. The address Dante had given me led to a building that looked like it belonged in a European capital rather than New York City. Ornate stonework, gleaming windows, and a doorman who regarded me with barely concealed disdain as I approached. "I'm here to see Dante Salvatore," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. The doorman's expression shifted from contempt to careful neutrality. He picked up a phone, murmured something I couldn't hear, then nodded curtly. "Penthouse. Top floor." The elevator was all mirrors and brass, and I couldn't escape my own reflection. Pale skin, nervous eyes, cheap clothes that screamed I didn't belong here. The ride up felt endless, each floor ticking by like a countdown to a decision I couldn't take back. When the doors opened, they didn't lead to a hallway. They opened directly into an apartment that stole the breath from my lungs. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, the light spreading out like stars reflected in water. The space was enormous, decorated with understated elegance. Dark leather furniture, expensive art I didn't recognize, and that same scent from last night, cedar and bergamot, but stronger here, mixed with wood smoke from a fireplace I could see crackling in the corner. Dante stood by those windows, his back to me, hands in his pockets. He wore a dark gray sweater and black pants, more casual than last night, but somehow even more imposing. The city lights cast his shadow long and dark across the marble floor. "You came." He didn't turn around. "I wasn't certain you would. You didn't give me much choice." My voice echoed in the vast space, small and defiant. Now he turned, and the intensity in his eyes made my knees weak. "There's always a choice, Emma. You could have blocked my number, could have stayed home, could have called the police." He moved toward me with the fluid grace of a predator, and I forced myself not to step back. "But you're here. which tells me something. It tells you I'm desperate, I shot back, anger flaring through my fear. You looked at me in that restaurant and saw someone who could be manipulated. Someone vulnerable enough to... Stop. One word, but it cut through my tirade like a knife. He was close now. Close enough that I could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, the way his jaw tightened with barely restrained emotion. I looked at you and saw someone strong enough to still be standing after the world tried to break her, someone who speaks her grandmother's language even though it marks her as different. Someone who works herself to exhaustion because she refuses to give up. The words hit me harder than any blow. My vision blurred with tears I wouldn't let fall. "Why am I here?" I whispered. Dante reached out slowly, telegraphing his movement, and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. His touch was gentle, almost reverent, completely at odds with the dangerous man Marcus had warned me about. "Because," he said quietly, "I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since the moment you walked away from my table, and I always take what I want, Emma. Always." The possessiveness in his voice should have terrified me. Instead, it ignited something I didn't recognize. Something reckless and hungry and tired of being invisible. "What do you want from me?" His smile was dark, promising things I didn't understand. "Everything." The word hung between us like a declaration of war. Everything. As if I were something that could be taken, possessed, owned. The feminist part of me, the part my mother had tried so hard to nurture before the world beat it down, wanted to slap him. Wanted to tell him I wasn't some object to be collected and displayed in his pristine penthouse like the expensive art on his walls. But the rest of me, the part that had been struggling and drowning and gasping for air for so long, felt something else entirely. Seen, wanted, claimed by someone powerful enough to actually protect what was his. God, I was pathetic. I should go. I took a step back, and instantly his hand caught my wrist. Not tight. Not painful, just enough to stop my retreat. His skin was warm against mine, and I felt my pulse jump beneath his fingers. "Stay." Not a command this time, a request. "Have dinner with me. Let me explain." "Explain what? How you found my number? How you knew where I lived well enough to know I'm desperate? Or maybe you want to explain why, I stopped myself before saying the word. Mafia boss? Crime lord, murderer maybe. Why someone like you would notice someone like me. His thumb traced a circle on the inside of my wrist, right over my racing pulse. "You think I'm a monster. I think you're dangerous. I am." No denial, no attempt to soften it. "But not to you, Emma. Never to you." The certainty in his voice made me shiver. He guided me deeper into the penthouse, his hand never leaving my wrist, like he was afraid I'd bolt if he let go. He wasn't wrong. The dining room was set for two, crystal glasses, silver cutlery, candles flickering in the center of a table that could have seated 12. It was intimate and overwhelming all at once, like he'd been planning this, like my compliance had never been in question. "Sit," he said, pulling out a chair. This time I obeyed, my legs too shaky to protest. He took the seat across from me, and almost immediately, a door I hadn't noticed opened. A woman in her 50s emerged carrying 2 plates, her gray hair pulled back in a neat bun. She set the food in front of us without speaking, though her eyes lingered on me with something that looked like pity before she disappeared again. The smell hit me. Real Italian food, not the Americanized versions we served at Marco's. Homemade pasta with a wine sauce that made my mouth water, fresh bread still warm from the oven, and vegetables that looked like they'd been picked that morning. My stomach growled audibly, betraying how long it had been since I'd eaten a real meal. Dante's lips quirked slightly. "Eat." "Why are you doing this?" But even as I asked, I was reaching for my fork, my hunger overriding my pride. "You came into my restaurant last night." "It's not your restaurant," I interrupted, then froze. His expression hadn't changed, but something in the air shifted, became heavier, more dangerous. "Isn't it?" He leaned back in his chair, studying me with those dark, unreadable eyes. "Marco's Trattoria. You think Marco owns it? Marco hasn't owned anything in 15 years. Not since he borrowed money from my father and couldn't pay it back. The restaurant is mine. The building is mine. Every plate, every tablecloth, every miserable tip you collect. All of it filters back to me eventually. The pasta turned to ash in my mouth. You're lying. I never lie, tesoro. The Italian endearment sounded like a caress and a threat. Your boss pays me protection money every month. Most of Little Italy does. It's how this city works. How my family has kept order for generations. Order. He said it like he was providing a service, not running a criminal empire. I set down my fork, my appetite gone despite my hunger. So what? You saw me serving tables in a restaurant you technically own and decided I'd make a nice addition to your collection. Fire flashed in his eyes, anger, but also something else. Something that looked almost like hurt. You think so little of yourself that you can only imagine someone wanting you as a trophy? What else would I be to you? My voice cracked despite my best efforts. I have nothing. I am nothing. I wear clothes from thrift stores and eat ramen for dinner most nights, and I can't even afford to keep a roof over my head. You could have anyone. Models, actresses, socialites who actually belong in places like this. So either you're insane or you're playing some game I don't understand. And either way, I can't afford to be here. The silence that followed was deafening. Dante stood slowly, his chair scraping against the marble floor, and walked around the table. I tensed, waiting for anger, for violence, for confirmation that Marcus had been right to warn me away. Instead, he crouched beside my chair, bringing himself to my eye level, this close. I could see the exhaustion in his face, the weight he carried that had nothing to do with his expensive clothes or powerful position. He looked almost human. My father, he said quietly, built this empire on blood and fear. When he died 3 years ago, everyone expected me to be just like him, ruthless, cold, untouchable. His hand came up to cup my face, and I should have pulled away but couldn't. I am all of those things, Emma. I've done things that would make you hate me if you knew. I've hurt people, destroyed lives, made decisions that haunt me in the dark hours of the night. But then you walked up to my table, exhausted and invisible and so fucking beautiful it made my chest hurt, and you spoke to me in my grandmother's language. Do you know what you said? I shook my head, unable to form words. You asked if I wanted water. Acqua, signore? Just 2 words, but your accent, it wasn't textbook Italian. It was Calabrese, the dialect my grandmother spoke when she thought no one important was listening. The words she used to soothe me when I was a child, before this life swallowed me whole. His thumb traced my cheekbone, and I realized I was crying. You reminded me I used to be human. That somewhere under all this blood and darkness, there's still a man who remembers what it's like to be real. Dante. His name on my lips felt dangerous, intimate. I had you investigated, he continued, his voice roughening. I know about your mother, the cancer that took her, the debt she left behind, your stepfather who knocked you around until you ran away at 16. I know you've been surviving on your own for 6 years, working jobs that destroy you piece by piece, and somehow you still smile at customers who treat you like garbage. I know you send money to a women's shelter every month even though you can barely feed yourself, because you remember what it's like to need someone to care. I know everything, Emma, and it makes me want you more, not less. The thoroughness of his invasion into my privacy should have terrified me, should have sent me running. But all I felt was a strange, twisted relief. He'd seen the worst of me, the broken pieces I tried so hard to hide, and he was still here, looking at me like I was something precious. I can't be what you want, I whispered. I don't know how to be in your world. Then I'll teach you. His forehead pressed against mine, and I could feel his breath against my lips. Let me take care of you, Emma. Let me give you the life you deserve. No more struggling, no more exhaustion, no more being invisible. I'll make sure you never go hungry again. Never fear eviction. Never have to lower your eyes when dangerous men walk by. And what do you get out of this? Even now, I couldn't quite believe his motives were pure. Men like him didn't do anything without expecting payment. You. Simple. Devastating. I get to keep you safe, get to wake up knowing you're protected, get to fall asleep hearing you breathe beside me. That's all I want, Tesoro, just you. It was insane. He was offering me a gilded cage with invisible bars, a life of luxury purchased with blood money, a future where I'd be forever marked as belonging to a criminal. Every rational part of me screamed to refuse. My rent is due in 48 hours, I heard myself say. I have $17 in my bank account and nowhere else to go. Dante pulled back slightly, his eyes searching mine. Is that the only reason you'd say yes? Desperation, was it? I wanted to say yes. Wanted to pretend this was just a transaction, a survival choice no different from taking any other job. But I'd be lying to both of us. No, I admitted, my voice barely audible. I'm saying yes because when you look at me, I don't feel invisible anymore, and that's more dangerous than anything else you could offer. Something fierce and possessive flashed across his face. Then say it. Say you'll stay. I'll stay. The words felt like stepping off a cliff, exhilarating and terrifying all at once. Dante stood, pulling me up with him, and this time when his hands framed my face, I didn't pull away. His kiss was nothing like I'd expected. Not forceful or demanding, but gentle, questioning, like he was afraid I'd break. I melted into it despite every warning bell in my head, my hands fisting in his sweater as he deepened the kiss with a hunger that matched the one gnawing at my soul. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing hard. He rested his forehead against mine again, his hands trembling slightly where they gripped my waist. There are things you need to know, he said. Rules you'll need to follow, my world. It's not safe, Emma. There are people who would hurt you to get to me, rivals who would see you as a weakness to exploit. I'm not afraid. A lie. But I said it anyway. His laugh was dark, humorless. You should be. But I'll keep you safe. I have a security team that will be with you whenever you leave this building. You won't go back to that apartment. I'll have your things moved here tonight. You'll stop working at Marco's immediately. The rapid-fire changes made my head spin. I can't just disappear. I have a roommate, Sarah. She needs the rent money. I'll take care of it. Your rent will be paid for the next year. Your roommate won't suffer because of my selfishness. He stepped back, reaching into his pocket to pull out a phone. Not the one from last night. A different one. He made a call, speaking in rapid Italian too quick for me to follow, giving orders that would reshape my entire existence with a few words. I stood there, watching this man casually rearrange my life, and felt reality crashing down. This was really happening. I was really doing this, selling myself, because what else could you call it, to a man I'd met 24 hours ago. A man who killed people, who ruled through fear, who could destroy me with less effort than it took to make a phone call. I need to call Sarah, I said when he finished. She deserves to hear this from me. Dante handed me his phone without hesitation. No password protection, I noticed. Either he trusted me, or he didn't care if I saw what was on it. I dialed Sarah's number with shaking fingers. She answered on the second ring. Hello? Sarah, it's me. I'm using someone else's phone. Emma? Where are you? You said you'd text and it's been 3 hours. I know. I'm sorry. Listen, I need to tell you something. I took a deep breath, aware of Dante watching me with those intense dark eyes. I'm not coming home tonight, or tomorrow. I've taken a position, a live-in position. The rent for our apartment will be paid. What position? Emma, what the hell is going on? How did I explain this? How did I tell my best friend that I'd essentially sold myself to a mobster because I was tired of drowning? I can't explain right now, but I'm safe. I promise I'm safe. The money will be in the account by tomorrow morning. Take care of yourself, okay? Emma, don't hang up. I ended the call before she could ask more questions, before I lost my nerve entirely. Dante took the phone back, his expression unreadable. She'll hate me, I said quietly. Probably. He didn't offer false comfort. Most people will. That's the price of being mine, Tesoro. You'll be isolated from your old life, protected but imprisoned. Are you sure this is what you want? No. Yes. I didn't know anymore. But I was here and I'd made my choice. And turning back now felt impossible. Show me where I'll be staying, I said instead of answering. Dante's smile was equal parts satisfaction and darkness. He took my hand, lacing our fingers together in a gesture that felt more intimate than the kiss, and led me deeper into the penthouse. We passed rooms I barely registered, a library, a study, what looked like a gym, until we reached a pair of double doors at the end of a long hallway. "This," he said, pushing them open, "is our room. Our room. Not a guest room. Not a separate space where I could maintain some illusion of independence. Our room, with a massive bed dominating the center, more windows overlooking the city, and furniture that probably cost more than I'd made in my entire life. I won't touch you," Dante said, reading my panic. "Not until you ask me to. You have my word. And if I never ask?" His jaw tightened. "Then I'll sleep on the couch and hate every minute of it. But you'll still be mine, Emma. Still be protected. Still be cherished. I don't need your body to want your presence." The declaration should have sounded noble. Instead, it sounded like a challenge, like he was daring me to resist what was clearly already burning between us. "I need to shower," I said, desperate for space to think. "Where?" "Through there." He gestured to another door. "Everything you need should be there. I'll have clothes brought up for you tomorrow. For tonight, you can wear something of mine." I escaped into the bathroom before I could process that. Wearing his clothes, sleeping in his bed, belonging to him in ways I was only beginning to understand. The bathroom was obscenely luxurious, all marble and gold fixtures, with a shower big enough for 4 people. I stripped off my thrift store clothes and stepped under water so hot it almost burned, trying to wash away the feeling that I'd just made a deal with the devil. But even as the water pounded against my skin, even as I used soap that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget, I couldn't shake the truth that terrified me most. I didn't want to leave. Despite the danger, despite the impossibility of it all, some broken part of me had found exactly what it had been searching for in Dante's dark eyes. And that realization was more dangerous than any criminal empire could ever be. I emerged from the bathroom wrapped in a towel that was softer than any blanket I'd ever owned, my skin flushed from the heat and my mind still spinning. Dante had left one of his shirts on the bed. Black silk, expensive, smelling of cedar and bergamot. I slipped it on, the fabric falling to mid-thigh, and caught my reflection in the floor-length mirror. I looked different. Still me, but softer somehow. The dark circles under my eyes seemed less pronounced in the flattering lighting, and the shirt made me look like I belonged here, like I was the kind of woman who wore designer clothes and slept in penthouses. It was an illusion, but a seductive one. When I stepped back into the bedroom, Dante was standing by the windows again, his phone pressed to his ear. He was speaking Italian, his voice low and sharp with authority. I caught fragments, something about shipments and territory disputes and names I didn't recognize, business, the kind that left bodies in alleyways and blood on expensive suits. He ended the call when he noticed me, his eyes darkening as they traced over his shirt on my body. The possessiveness in that look made heat pool low in my belly despite my exhaustion. "Come here," he said, and I found myself obeying, drawn to him like metal to a magnet. He pulled me against his chest, his arms coming around me in an embrace that felt surprisingly tender for a man who'd just been discussing violence. I could hear his heartbeat, steady and strong, and feel the rise and fall of his breathing. For someone so dangerous, he made me feel impossibly safe. "Tell me about your grandmother," he murmured against my hair, "the one who taught you Calabrese." The request surprised me. I'd expected demands, rules, the framework of my new gilded cage, not questions about my past, about the woman who'd died when I was 12 and left a hole nothing had quite filled. "Nonna Rosa," I said softly. "She came to America when she was 16, already pregnant with my mother. Her family had disowned her for getting involved with the wrong man, a boy from a rival family back in Calabria. She worked as a seamstress in the garment district, raised my mother alone after her boyfriend was killed in some feud she never talked about." I paused, old grief rising in my throat. She used to tell me stories while she sewed, about the old country, about honor and family, and how blood ties could be both salvation and damnation. Dante's arms tightened around me. "She sounds like she was strong. She was everything." A tear slipped down my cheek before I could stop it. "When she died, part of me died too. My mother tried to fill that space, but she was already sick by then. already losing her battle with cancer. And then she was gone too, and I was alone with a stepfather who blamed me for draining what little money we had on hospital bills. He hit you. Not a question. A statement laced with barely contained fury. Until I learned to hide, until I got smart enough to run. I pulled back slightly to look up at him. Why does it matter? Why do you care about any of this? Because, he said, his hand coming up to wipe away my tear with surprising gentleness, I need to understand what made you. What shaped you into someone strong enough to survive when the world tried to break you, and because every man who ever hurt you, every person who made you feel less than precious, they need to pay for that. The darkness in his voice should have frightened me. Instead, it made something fierce and primal surge through my chest. No one had ever wanted to avenge me before. No one had ever cared enough to be angry on my behalf. My stepfather is gone, I said. Disappeared 2 years ago. Probably dead in a ditch somewhere for owing the wrong people money. Dante's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes, understanding. Maybe even satisfaction. Probably, he agreed, in a tone that made me wonder if my stepfather's disappearance had been quite as random as I'd assumed. Before I could ask, his phone buzzed again. He glanced at it, his jaw tightening. I need to handle something. It won't take long. He guided me toward the bed, pulling back the covers. Sleep. You're exhausted, and tomorrow will bring its own challenges. What kind of challenges? But I was already sinking into the mattress. My body finally acknowledging the bone-deep exhaustion I'd been carrying for years. The sheets were cool silk against my skin, and the pillows felt like clouds. The kind where the city finds out you're mine, Dante said, leaning down to press a kiss to my forehead. Rest, Tesoro. I'll be back soon. I wanted to argue, wanted to demand answers to the 1,000 questions swirling in my mind. But sleep pulled at me like a riptide, and I couldn't fight it anymore. The last thing I remembered was the sound of the door closing and the lingering scent of cedar, wrapping around me like a promise. I woke to sunlight streaming through windows I didn't recognize, and the sound of voices speaking rapid Italian in another room. For a disorienting moment, I couldn't remember where I was. Then it all came rushing back. The restaurant, the card, the penthouse. Dante's hands on my face as he kissed me like I was something he'd been searching for his entire life. I'd sold my soul to the devil, and part of me couldn't regret it. The bedroom door opened, and a woman entered. Not the one from last night, but younger, maybe in her 30s, with dark hair pulled into a sleek ponytail and sharp eyes that assessed me with professional efficiency. "Buongiorno, signorina Russo," she said, her accent thick and genuine. "I am Lucia. Mr. Salvatore has asked me to help you this morning. There are clothes in the closet for you to choose from, and breakfast will be ready when you are." I sat up, clutching the silk sheet to my chest even though I was wearing Dante's shirt. "Where is he?" "Handling business. He will return this afternoon." Lucia moved to the closet, opening doors to reveal an array of clothing that definitely hadn't been there last night. Dresses, pants, blouses, all in my size, all clearly expensive. "Please choose what you like. I will help you dress." "I can dress myself," I said automatically, then felt immediately foolish. Of course I could dress myself, but this was my life now. Staff, luxury, the trappings of wealth built on violence. Lucia's expression softened slightly. "Of course, signorina. I will wait in the sitting room. Take your time." She left, and I forced myself out of bed, my legs shaky. The clothes in the closet were beautiful. Designer labels I'd only seen in magazines. Fabrics that felt like butter under my fingers. I chose black pants and a cream-colored blouse. Simple enough that I didn't feel like I was playing dress-up. Expensive enough that I knew I'd never be able to afford to replace them if I spilled something. The transformation was subtle, but unmistakable. These clothes fit properly, tailored to skim my body in ways that made me look elegant rather than desperate. I stared at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman looking back. Breakfast was laid out in the dining room. Fresh fruit, pastries, coffee that smelled like heaven. Lucia hovered nearby, professional but watchful, and I realized with a start that she wasn't just staff. She was a guard. Another layer of the protection Dante had promised. "How long have you worked for him?" I asked. needing to fill the silence with something other than my own spiraling thoughts. 7 years, Signorina, since his father died and he took over the family business. What was his father like? Lucia's expression shuddered. Powerful, feared, not a good man. She paused, then added quietly, Mr. Salvatore is different, harder in some ways, but with honor his father never possessed. The men respect him not just from fear but from loyalty. I wanted to ask more, but the elevator doors opened with a soft chime. 2 men in dark suits entered. Not Dante, but the security guards from the restaurant. They nodded respectfully to me, then spoke to Lucia in Italian too rapid for me to follow. Signorina? Lucia turned to me. There is someone here to see you, a Sarah Mitchell. She is quite insistent. My stomach dropped. Sarah? Of course she'd tracked me down somehow. Of course she wouldn't just accept my cryptic phone call and mysterious disappearance. Let her up, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Please. The guards exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable with allowing an outsider into their boss's private sanctuary. But Lucia nodded, and they stepped back into the elevator. Minutes later, it returned with Sarah, her eyes wide and furious as she took in the opulent surroundings. What the hell, Emma? She spotted me across the room and stormed over. You disappear with a phone call about some mysterious live-in position. The rent mysteriously gets paid in full. And then I can't reach you on your phone. She stopped, really looking at me for the first time. At my expensive clothes, the luxury surrounding me, the guards standing at attention by the elevator. Oh my God. Emma, what have you done? Sarah. Is this prostitution? Are you... She lowered her voice, glancing at Lucia and the guards. Are you sleeping with someone for money? Because I don't care how desperate we were. There are other options. It's not like that. But wasn't it? Wasn't that exactly what this was? Just dressed up in nicer clothes and prettier words? Then what is it like? Explain to me how you went from serving tables to living in a penthouse overnight. Sarah's voice cracked, and I saw tears in her eyes. I'm scared for you, Em. This doesn't feel right. Before I could answer, the elevator chimed again. Every guard in the room straightened, their hands moving subtly toward concealed weapons. Dante emerged, still dressed in yesterday's clothes, his jaw dark with stubble and his eyes hard with exhaustion. He took in the scene, Sarah's anger, my distress, the tension crackling through the air, in one sweeping glance. Miss Mitchell, he said, his voice carrying the weight of authority that made even Sarah take an instinctive step back. I'm glad you came. Emma has been worried about you. Sarah's eyes widened as she recognized him. From where, I didn't know, but clearly she knew enough to be afraid. You're Dante Salvatore. I am. He moved to my side, his hand finding the small of my back in a gesture of possession that was probably visible from space. And Emma is under my protection now. That includes making sure her friends are taken care of. Protection? Sarah's laugh was sharp, hysterical. Is that what you're calling it? Everyone knows what you are, what your family does. Emma, please, you have to leave with me right now, before this goes any further. I can't, I whispered, and saw something break in her expression. Why not? What does he have on you? She turned to Dante, fearless in her fury. What are you threatening her with? Because I know she wouldn't stay here willingly. I know my best friend, and she wouldn't... She would, Dante interrupted, his voice soft but lethal. Because she's tired of struggling, because she deserves better than the life that's been grinding her down, because I can give her things you can't. Safety, comfort, a future that doesn't involve working herself to death for pennies. His hand tightened on my back. And because she wants to be here, even if she's afraid to admit it. The truth of that statement hung in the air between us. Sarah looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw the moment she understood. Saw her realize that some part of me had chosen this, had wanted this, had been desperate enough or broken enough or simply tired enough to accept a devil's bargain. Emma, she said, her voice small and hurt. Please tell me he's wrong. I opened my mouth to lie, to tell her I was being forced, that I needed rescue. But the words wouldn't come, because Dante wasn't wrong, not entirely. I'm sorry, I whispered instead. I'm so sorry, Sarah. She stared at me for a long moment, tears streaming down her face, then turned and walked back to the elevator. The guards let her pass without comment. I watched the doors close on my best friend's devastated expression and felt something inside me crack. "She'll forgive you," Dante said quietly. "In time." "Will she?" I pulled away from him, anger and grief warring in my chest. "You just made me choose between her friendship and this, whatever this is. You made me show her that I picked you over her, over everything I've ever known. How is she supposed to forgive that?" "Because she loves you, and because I'll make sure she's protected too. Whether she wants my help or not." He caught my chin, forcing me to look at him. "This is what it means to be mine, Emma. Difficult choices, burned bridges, a life that exists separate from the one you knew. I told you there would be a price. I didn't realize how high it would be," I said, my vision blurring with tears. "Neither did I," he admitted, his thumb brushing across my cheekbone. "But I'm not letting you go. Not now. Not ever. So we'll both have to learn to live with what that costs." The possessiveness, the absolute certainty in his voice, should have made me angry, should have made me fight. Instead, I found myself leaning into his touch, seeking comfort from the same man who'd just orchestrated my isolation. Maybe I was as broken as he was. Maybe that's why this worked. The days that followed blurred together in a strange, dreamlike haze. I woke each morning in silk sheets, ate meals I hadn't prepared, and wore clothes that cost more than I used to make in a month. Dante was gone more often than not. "Business," he said, though we both knew what that business entailed. But when he returned, he was attentive in ways that made my resistance crumble piece by piece. He brought me books when he noticed me staring out the windows, took me to a private rooftop garden when I mentioned missing the outdoors, listened when I talked about Nonna Rosa, about my mother, about the girl I used to be before poverty and loss had ground her down to nothing. And slowly, terrifyingly, I began to fall for the man behind the monster. It was the little things that destroyed me. The way he remembered I took my coffee with too much sugar. How he'd absently reach for my hand when we sat together, like he needed the contact to breathe. The rare smiles that transformed his severe face into something almost boyish. The nightmares that woke him in the dark hours, when he'd pull me close and bury his face in my hair like I was the only thing tethering him to humanity. 2 weeks after I'd moved into the penthouse, everything changed. I was reading in the library, a first edition of something Italian I could barely understand, when Lucia appeared in the doorway, her face pale and drawn. "Signorina, you need to come with me. Now." The urgency in her voice made my heart stutter. "What's wrong? Is it Dante?" "He's fine. But there's been a development. Please, we need to get you to the safe room." Safe room. The words sent ice through my veins. Dante had shown it to me my second day here. A reinforced panic room hidden behind a bookshelf, stocked with supplies and communication equipment. He'd made me memorize the code, made me promise I'd use it if Lucia or his guards ever told me to. "I don't understand." "Now, Signorina." Lucia grabbed my arm, pulling me toward the bookshelf. Behind us, I heard shouting, the sound of the elevator arriving, footsteps that were too heavy, too numerous to be Dante's usual guards. My hands shook as I punched in the code. The bookshelf swung open, revealing a small room lined with monitors showing security feeds throughout the penthouse. Lucia shoved me inside, then turned back toward the main room. "Wait!" I caught her arm. "What's happening? Where's Dante?" "On his way." "Lock the door behind me, Signorina. Don't come out until Mr. Salvatore himself tells you it's safe." She was gone before I could argue, the bookshelf sliding closed with a hydraulic hiss. I threw the internal locks with trembling fingers, then collapsed against the wall, my breath coming in sharp gasps. The monitors showed chaos. Armed men I didn't recognize were spreading through the penthouse, overturning furniture, weapons drawn. Dante's guards were fighting back. I watched one of them go down, blood blooming across his white shirt like a horrible flower. Lucia appeared on screen, speaking rapidly into a phone, her other hand holding a gun I'd never seen her carry before. This was real. This was actually happening. This was the other side of Dante's world. The violence he'd tried to keep me sheltered from. The monitor showing the entrance flickered. More men poured out of the elevator, and at their center was someone who made my blood run cold. He was older than Dante, maybe 45, with silver threading through his dark hair, and a face that would have been handsome if not for the cruelty in his eyes. He moved through the penthouse like he owned it, checking rooms with the efficiency of someone who'd planned this carefully. One of Dante's guards, Marco, I thought his name was, stepped into his path. The older man didn't even hesitate. He pulled out a gun and shot Marco in the head with casual indifference, then stepped over the body like it was nothing more than an inconvenient obstacle. I pressed my hand over my mouth to keep from screaming. This couldn't be happening. This couldn't be real. The older man was getting closer to the library. To me. On the monitor, I watched him pause, his head tilting like he was listening. Then he smiled, a terrible smile that promised pain, and walked straight toward the bookshelf that hid my safe room. How did he know? How could he possibly know? Emma Russo. His voice came through the door, muffled but clear enough. I know you're in there. Dante's little pet, hidden away like the treasure you are. Come out, and I promise I'll make this quick. I bit down on my knuckles to keep silent, my entire body shaking. No? That's fine. We'll wait. You see, Dante will come running when he realizes his home has been breached. And when he does, when he sees what I'm going to do to you, the man laughed, and it was the sound of something fundamentally broken. That's when he'll finally understand what it means to take everything from someone. Take everything. The words echoed in my head. This wasn't random. This was personal. Revenge. The monitors showed the entrance again, and my heart stopped. Dante had arrived. I could see him emerging from the elevator with at least a dozen men, all armed, all moving with lethal purpose. But the older man had to have 30, maybe 40. Dante was outnumbered. He was going to die trying to save me. The realization hit me like a physical blow. This was my fault. My presence here had made him vulnerable, had given his enemies a weakness to exploit. Just like he'd warned me, just like I'd been too selfish to fully understand. On the monitor, I watched Dante take in the carnage. His guards on the floor, blood on his expensive marble, his sanctuary violated, his face transformed into something I'd never seen before. Not the gentle man who held me at night, but something ancient and terrifying. A predator who'd been pushed too far. Vittorio! His roar echoed through the penthouse, making even the armed men flinch. Show yourself, you coward. The older man, Vittorio, smiled and stepped out of the library. On the monitor, I watched the two men face each other across the destroyed living room, decades of hatred crackling between them. Little Dante, Vittorio said, his voice dripping with mockery. Still playing at being a boss. Did you really think I'd forgotten? Did you think I'd just accept what you did to my son? Your son was a traitor and a rapist. He got what he deserved. He was blood, my blood, and you executed him like a dog in the street. Vittorio's composure cracked, revealing the madness underneath. So now I'm going to take your blood. That sweet little waitress you've been hiding. I'm going to make you watch while Dante moved so fast I almost missed it. 1 second he was standing still, the next he'd closed the distance and buried a knife in Vittorio's shoulder. Chaos erupted, gunfire, shouting, bodies falling. I watched the monitors with tears streaming down my face, unable to look away, unable to help. Dante fought like the devil himself, with a precision and brutality that should have terrified me. But all I felt was desperate fear. For him. For the guards dying in his defense. For the life we'd barely started to build. Vittorio stumbled back, his hand pressed to his bleeding shoulder, his men forming a protective circle around him. Kill them all! He screamed. Burn this place to the ground, find that girl, and bring her to me. More gunfire, more bodies. The monitors showed Dante's men gaining ground, pushing Vittorio's forces back, but there were still too many, still too much chaos. Then I saw it. One of Vittorio's men had broken away from the main fight. He was in the library, moving toward the bookshelf, a gun in one hand and a cruel smile on his face. He knew where I was. Somehow. He knew. He reached for the bookshelf, and I realized the safe room wouldn't save me. These men had come prepared. They had plans, backup plans. Vittorio had known exactly where Dante would hide his most precious possession. The man's fingers found the seam of the hidden door, started to pry it open. I had seconds to decide, stay hidden and pray Dante could reach me in time or face this myself. Either way, I was probably going to die. But if I was going to die, I'd do it on my feet. I found the emergency pistol Dante had shown me. Small, silver, loaded with 6 bullets I'd never thought I'd have to use. My hands shook as I disengaged the safety, remembering his instructions from the one lesson he'd insisted on. Point, breathe, squeeze. The bookshelf swung open. The man's eyes widened in surprise when he saw me standing there, armed, terrified but defiant. "Well," he said, his accent thick. "Looks like Dante's pet has claws." "Get back," I said, my voice steadier than my hands. "I will shoot you." He laughed and raised his gun. "No, you won't. You're not like us. You're just a scared little—" I pulled the trigger. The recoil nearly knocked me down. The sound was deafening in the small space, but my bullet found its target, his shoulder. Not his chest like I'd aimed for, but enough. He went down with a scream, his gun clattering across the floor. I stepped over him, my entire body shaking, and ran toward the sound of fighting, toward Dante. Toward the man I'd chosen despite every logical reason not to. The living room was a war zone, bodies on the floor. I couldn't tell which side they belonged to. Couldn't process anything except the need to find Dante. And then I saw him, locked in hand-to-hand combat with Vittorio. Both men bloodied and furious. "Emma, get back!" Dante's moment of distraction cost him. Vittorio landed a punch that sent him staggering. "How touching!" Vittorio snarled. He pulled out another gun. Where did these men keep finding weapons? And pointed it directly at me. "Say goodbye, Dante. Let's see if you can live with yourself after—" The gunshot came from behind me. Vittorio's expression froze, then crumpled. He looked down at the blood spreading across his chest, then back up at me with something like confusion. Then he fell, and didn't move again. I turned to find Lucia, her gun still raised, her face spattered with blood. "No one touches the signorina," she said calmly. "No one." The remaining invaders saw their leader fall and broke. Some tried to run. Dante's men cut them down before they reached the elevator. Others surrendered, dropping weapons and raising hands in the universal gesture of defeat. And then, it was over, just like that. The terrible, violent storm passed, leaving destruction in its wake. Dante crossed the distance between us in 3 strides. His hands were on my face, in my hair, checking me for injuries with frantic precision. "Are you hurt? Did they touch you?" "Emma Tesoro, look at me. I shot someone," I whispered, the reality of it hitting me like a truck. "I killed—" "You defended yourself. You survived. That's all that matters." He pulled me against his chest, and I felt him shaking just as badly as I was. "You could have died. Vittorio could have taken you from me, and I would have burned this entire city down trying to get you back. He said his son was a monster who hurt women for sport. I executed him 2 years ago for breaking our code. Vittorio swore revenge, but I thought—" His voice broke. "I thought I'd handled it. I thought you'd be safe here. I'm sorry, Emma. I'm so fucking sorry." I pulled back to look at him. This powerful man who'd turned my life upside down, who'd offered me everything and demanded the same in return. His face was bruised, bleeding from a cut above his eye, but he was alive. We were both alive. "I love you," I said, the words falling out before I could stop them. "I know I shouldn't. I know this is insane and wrong and probably the worst decision I've ever made. But I love you, Dante, and I'm not leaving." Something fierce and possessive blazed in his eyes. "Say it again." "I love you." This time I smiled, even though I was crying. "You terrifying, impossible, wonderful man. I love you." He kissed me then, right there in the middle of the destruction, surrounded by bodies and blood and the wreckage of his perfect sanctuary. It was desperate and claiming and tasted like violence and salvation all at once. When we finally broke apart, Lucia was directing the cleanup with calm efficiency, as if this was just another day in the life of a Mafia boss's household. Maybe it was. Maybe this was my life now. Beautiful and terrible, luxurious and violent, safe and dangerous all at once. "Marry me," Dante said abruptly. "Not because you're grateful, not because you're scared. Marry me because you love me, and I love you, and I want the whole world to know you're mine." That's the worst proposal I've ever heard. It's also the only one you'll ever get, because I'm never letting you go. His smile was dark and certain. "Marry me, Emma Russo. Let me give you my name, my protection, my everything." I should have said no, should have demanded time to process, to think, to be rational. But I'd stopped being rational the moment I sat down in his booth 2 weeks ago. "Yes," I said. "Yes, I'll marry you." The wedding happened 3 weeks later in a small church in Little Italy, the same one where my grandmother used to pray. Dante had it locked down with enough security to protect the president, but inside, it was just us. A handful of his most trusted men, Lucia crying into a handkerchief, and Sarah. She'd come after I called her, after I begged her to understand. We weren't the same friends we'd been, maybe we never would be again, but she'd shown up in a blue dress and hugged me tight enough to hurt. "Are you happy?" she'd asked, studying my face for the truth. "I'm terrified," I admitted. "But yes, impossibly, inexplicably yes." "Then I'm here," she said simply. "Even if I think you're insane." I wore my grandmother's wedding dress, carefully preserved, smelling faintly of lavender and mothballs. Dante wore a black suit that probably cost more than most people's cars. And when I walked down that short aisle, his expression transformed into something that made my breath catch. Pure love, pure possession, pure certainty that I was his future, his salvation, his everything. Father Michael kept the ceremony short. He'd known my family, had blessed my grandmother and baptized my mother, and he looked at Dante with the same wariness everyone did. But he spoke the words that bound us together. And when Dante slipped the ring on my finger, a massive diamond surrounded by sapphires that matched my eyes, I felt the weight of the choice I'd made settle into my bones. "You may kiss your bride." Dante pulled me close, his hands framing my face in that gesture I'd come to crave. "Mine," he whispered against my lips. "Finally, completely mine." "Yours," I agreed, "always yours." The kiss sealed more than our marriage. It sealed the death of Emma Russo, invisible waitress, and the birth of Emma Salvatore, wife of the most dangerous man in the city. I'd never be invisible again, never be overlooked, never be ordinary. I'd traded one cage for another, but this one was gilded with love and lined with silk sheets, and the man who held the key looked at me like I'd hung the moon. Was it perfect? No. Was it safe? Absolutely not. But it was mine, and I was his, and somehow that was enough. 6 months later, I stood in the penthouse, rebuilt, redecorated, made new again, and felt life move beneath my ribs. Our child, growing in secret, a product of violence and passion, and a love I never knew I could feel. Dante came up behind me, his hands settling on my still flat stomach with reverent care. "How long have you known?" 2 weeks. I was waiting for the right moment to tell you." He turned me in his arms, and I saw tears in his eyes, the first I'd ever witnessed from this man of stone and fury. "A child. Our child. Emma, tesoro, you've given me everything. We've given each other everything," I corrected. "The good and the bad and the impossible." Outside, the city spread before us like a promise and a threat. Somewhere down there, someone was plotting. Someone was watching. Someone wanted what we had, wanted to take it away. That was the price of this life, the cost of loving a man like Dante Salvatore. But as he held me, as he pressed kisses to my hair and murmured Italian endearments, I finally understood. I knew I'd make the same choice again, and again, and again. I'd been overlooked my entire life, invisible to everyone who mattered, until one night, I spoke 2 words in my grandmother's language, and a monster decided I was worth seeing. Now I was seen. I was cherished. I was loved by a man who would burn the world down to keep me safe. And somehow, impossibly, I'd become exactly who I was always meant to be. Not in spite of the danger, but because of it. Emma Salvatore, wife, mother-to-be, queen of a dark empire, and I wouldn't have it any other way.